We continue looking at matters that affect us here in the country or around the continent. And one of those issues definitely is the wheels of justice and how they turn for children. We just got off a week long of celebrations or commemorations of the Day of the African Child. And one of those key messages is how friendly the system is towards children. And we want to see how that was established many, many years ago, where children in South Africa marched and looked at rights for education. And during this march or during this protest, quite a number of these children were killed. And then rose the conversation about what are we really going to do to make sure these children are protected. And in 1991, where the OAU, when it still was there, came up with a number of resolutions and said, you know what, this is something that we need to actually take into consideration to make sure that when we're looking at justice for children who under the age of 18 cannot be, deemed as, obviously will not be deemed as adults, how are we going to make sure that they're actually protected? And then this came about, the Day of the African Child, #1, which was then a week of real focus at what resolutions would be reached, and thereafter using the rest of the year to make sure that these resolutions by country were really, really looked at, promoted, and then entrenched in law. In Kenya, we've seen that the Children's Act, looking at it to go beyond just an act now, and actually having it as pegged onto the constitution so that it's part of the country's framework. This year, it's been looking at making sure that the justice system is actually friendly towards children. And when it comes to justice, legality of certain cases, unfortunately, we see quite a lot going on. Children having to deal with sexual abuse, having to deal with home-based violence, having to deal with all manner of things like early childhood marriage and rape and pregnancy, across board. And so this year, the focus has been to make sure that the justice system is actually friendly moving forward. And how has that been? Is it really possible? Is it really achievable in this country? This morning, we're going to have that conversation, obviously. We're joined on the line by Lady Justice Theresia Matheka of the Children's Court, and she's going to be having that conversation with us. Already on the line. Good morning, Justice Matheka.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. In the room this morning with Eric Latif and Siti Muga, as we look at some of those issues. So thank you for joining us in the Situation Room this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So many things. If we can jump right into the conversation, so many things happening, but maybe we can start, just on the legal side of it before we go into some of the nitty-gritty. When we say that we are trying to look towards a system that's more friendly towards children, what exactly do we mean?
Thank you very much. I think we have to start by asking ourselves, what is this system? When we talk about a child-friendly justice system, what is the system? And the system is made up of course, the legal framework. You have actually spoken a bit about it. We have our constitution, which takes into consideration the international instruments that we have ratified. That includes the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child, and the UNCRC, that's the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And those instruments create institutions, and those institutions have infrastructure and people, and all of them are brought together when you talk about the child by the child. And these institutions, as you may be aware, don't just start from the judiciary. They start from the family. The family is the focal point of justice for a child. Starts from there. Moves into now the other system, the police, the courts, the probation department, the children's department, the prisons, and NGOs, and of course the media. We can't leave you out of that. So it's a whole system that is there. So when we talk about whether this is possible, then we must look at how each player does their job, or what they bring on board to deal with this child. So my answer would be that it's possible to have a child-friendly justice system in this country. It is possible. There may be challenges, and maybe those are the things we'll dive into along the way. But my view I'm very, I'm a believer that it is possible.
I mean, for the longest time, and I think even up till now, perhaps this could be the reason why we see children being treated the way that they are treated, is that children are regarded as property of their parents, right?
Yes.
What they would think, how they would act, what they eat, the way they dress, where they go to school is the decision of their parents, if they go to school, in some cases, in quite a lot of instances. So if you come off of that, then you're dealing with a mindset already. You're dealing with a tradition, a culture, a way of doing things. How then do we incorporate legality and justice into a culture, or divorce a culture of doing things now when you want to introduce justice?
Thank you very much. You see, the child belongs to the parent, but the parent acts within the law. One of the things about having law is that the law comes right into our homes, and particularly when something goes wrong. Everything a family is regulated by the law, so that a parent may say, this is my child, but there is a law that says how you are going to deal with this child whenever you're dealing with that child. For example, you mentioned education, and you said if the child goes to school, but we have a law that says every child has a right to education, and therefore this parent is required to ensure their child goes to school. The responsibility of the state is to ensure that there's an education system in place, so that if the parent fails to take the child to school, then that parent can be held accountable by that law that requires him to ensure the child goes to school. So as much as the child is born and raised by a parent, but there are parameters of the law. The law gets into the home and regulates the way the parent deals with that child. Because the child has rights which will be enforced by the state if the parent does not do their job. I hope
Yes,
I've made that a bit clear. Yes.
But when we speak of a child-friendly justice system, what is this? What is it that we define as child-friendly?
Thank you. The first thing is to recognize who is a child. Maybe if I was sitting there, I would ask you if you've ever been to a court. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Yes, I have.
You can imagine. I don't know how you
not
felt.
in the dock, but I have been in the court.
Okay, even the court area. Some years ago, even I, working in the system, one time appeared before a colleague to give evidence years ago in a matter that was I was required to do so. And it was not friendly to me as an adult, even as a player within the same system. But things have changed along the way. But what is it that we say? First, it's who is this child? It is somebody who is defined by our law as any person below the age of 18. Now, when we say the system needs to be friendly, it is where we are able to be aware that the person we are dealing with is a child, is not mature, is not developed at the level of the people in the room, that these things are strange to them, that they need to understand what is happening, they need to be explained in a way that they understand, at their level, that everyone handling this person needs to be aware that this is actually a child, someone who may not be at the same level as everyone else in the room, and remembering that there are certain minimums that are in the law as to what we need to do. For example, just the practicalities of it. For example, if a child is going to come into a courtroom, it is expected, if you were to do it right, that before they come, someone will have brought them there and told them, look, when you come in here, there'll be a judge or magistrate sitting there. There'll be a prosecutor sitting here. You will be sitting there. There'll be an advocate. There'll be someone explaining to you how you are going to behave in this place. And so that when they actually come into that courtroom, they're able to acclimatize themselves to that. But that is just the practical bit of it. But when we talk about the system being friendly, we have to start with the people who are in that system, the infrastructure that is in that. Are these people aware of the kind of person they are dealing with? And that goes to training, for example. If I'm a magistrate or a judge, do I understand I'm dealing with a child? If I am a police officer, do I understand that I am dealing with a child? If I'm a prison officer in the Boston institution, do I understand that? Am I aware, not just seeing the person, but am I aware of exactly what my role is in dealing with this child? As a government, when we are putting up these institutions, say, for example, the remand homes for children, are we consciously aware that that is a place we are going to hold children? What programs are we putting there for this child who, for example, stole something or hit another one or killed a person? Do we have, are we putting in something there to really to address the needs of that child? So it is actually every person there, every infrastructure, every system that is there, because people, as you sit there, that our legal framework is very good. It is at international standard.
Yeah.
But the issue is putting it in place and ensuring that every institution is aware.
Now,
and
secondly, when you hear something like that, okay, go ahead.
Before I leave that point,
yes,
whether we have put money, I'm talking about putting money in those institutions that is directly addressed to providing justice for the child. So those are the issues, yes.
My follow-up question on that is, okay,
yes.
As you explain it, it sounds pretty straightforward. That for an adult, and you're thinking of, it's a child who's going to come here, you will, even if previously we hadn't done this, when we started talking about these reforms, those are reforms that would be implemented, and within a short period of time, let's say even a year or two, would have significant progress in this. However, and I haven't been in your court, I don't know, but from hearing, from what we hear from out here, this has not yet reached that level where we expect that it should be reaching. We don't see this kind of orientation of minors being taken to court before. We don't see the treatment by the correctional officers. We don't see the same treatment by police officers. We don't see treatment by court, by even magistrates and other judges. Why would it take so long to do something so, it's just snapping a finger?
Thank you very much. As you mentioned at the beginning of your question, is that there are actually reforms. Things were bad at some point, but there are reforms going on. You are aware that the judiciary put in place a task force. I hope you are aware of that. A task force, a special task force on issues of children with regard to access to justice. It is housed under the National Council on Administration of Justice. This task force is made up of all the players in the justice system and is chaired by the Honorable Justice Matheka, Judge of the Court of Appeal. And this task force actually went out to look at the things we are talking about now. And I can tell you that all the things you are saying, the bad things, let me just use one word to say the bad things, the negative things you've talked about, we are not saying they are not there. They are there. And it was, like ourselves going out to see for ourselves the things we do badly on the ground. And those gaps are there. I'll give you an example. You go to say a remand home and find that children walk barefoot. Why? Because the government has not given money to run that institution. You get me? So that you have children there and they are there and they don't have shoes. And when you ask, you are told the budget, in fact, the AIE for this institution has not been given for the last so many quarters. So, and there are children who have committed offenses and for whom the law says they need to be taken there. You see? So those things are there. But what we did as we went round, because I happened to be a member of that task force, is the moment you identify something, it was like a three-pronged activity. You go to the ground, you'll find that this is a mistake, and it went together with a kind of awareness training where you bring all the court users together and actually interrogate, why are we not dealing with the children the way we are supposed to do? And those members of the court users would actually come up and say, these are the gaps. So how are we going to address them from our level? Okay, and the issues that could be addressed at that ground level, were actually addressed, where one of the things would be maybe lack of collaboration among the stakeholders, among the court users of the children's court, and would leave the place knowing that these people are now together and they're going to continue having this conversation. The other thing that happened is that the issues that were for the high offices, let me use that word, say for the CS in the ministry, for the Chief Justice, those issues were presented to those people so that those officers would be able to see how do we now move forward with these particular issues. So the conversation is not starting today with the Day of the African Child.
Yeah.
We noticed some time ago that there is a problem in the implementation of the law, and a reform process started. So as we talk now, this week has been a reminder, a big thing, an international day, reminding everybody that we actually need to have this conversation. But it has been an ongoing conversation among the stakeholders, that we are aware we are not doing the right thing, and therefore we need to start doing the right thing for children. And that is a push that is going even as we speak now.
Justice, I'm glad you have mentioned, the word process. You are part of this process, but
yes,
again,
I am.
Yes, you are, and a very important part of the process. And yet, before a child ever comes to you or to the system under which you actually work, there are other institutions, there are other circumstances in which they actually develop and grow.
Yes.
Now, where I'm going with what I'm trying to say is this. If, say, for instance, the police force are not educated or sensitized sufficiently in these matters to understand what these rights entail, if the community the child comes from are not sufficiently sensitized, then the work that you do there, one, you'll be overburdened by whatever it is that you handle when children come to you. But secondly, the system will not work. What is it that the government has put in place to ensure that this 360 approach towards the child is actually handled?
Thank you very much. You see, one of the things that we realized, I'll speak for the judiciary because that's where I spend all my life, all my time, and the other people we work with who are part of government within that system. What we realize is that no one agency can work alone. If the judiciary is doing very well, or the police are doing very well, and the other parts are not working well, the child will get hurt in the process. I think that is a given, that if the community is not aware of what's supposed to happen, if the police are not aware of what is supposed to happen, then something will give along the way. And when you ask what the government has put in place, I think I can only speak for what I know among the people we work with, and that is the court users committee. And like I said earlier, the court users committees are made up of all the people who deal with children or cases within the justice system. And I mentioned the agencies. One thing is that they sit together, brought together by under the National Council on Administration of Justice. They sit together, or we sit together, and look at these particular issues together and find solutions at the local level. Because without that collaboration, we cannot be able to work, to be able to give this service to the child. So that working together, I can say it is the one, the biggest success in my view, in terms of ensuring that everybody who handles a child can actually sit at the same table and say, today we don't have fuel to take this child to this institution. Who among us has fuel to fuel this vehicle to transport this child to that place? Are you getting me?
Yep.
Because the challenge we have is that we don't have a budget line that says this is money
specifically
for the justice system for children.
Yeah.
We don't have. And that is the biggest challenge for all of us. In fact, none of those institutions has money put somewhere saying this is money for justice for the children. And And for me, if you ask me, that is one of the greatest undoings in giving children.
Justice, if I hear you correctly, you are saying
yes.
that in all our wonderful budgeting, the government has never put aside money for matters that concern the child with regards to the court system.
Accessing justice.
Not court system, but issues, specifically issues of justice.
Yeah.
You see, for example, let me give you an example. When a child has been committed from a court, okay, to be escorted to an institution, to some place, you'll find, for example, the police station telling you, we do not have money to have this child taken to that place. What does that mean? I have made an order today for the child to be transported from point A to point B from this court. But because there's no funding, there's no funding for that specific item, then this child ends up staying there, waiting for the day money will be found for this child to be taken to that place.
Transported. And mainly because
so
the Boston institution is far from the court.
For example, yes, what did you say?
I'm saying mainly because the Boston institution, for instance, will be far from the court. It's not like a court has a Boston institution nearby.
No. In fact, there are only 3 in the country.
There you go.
Yeah, there are only 3. The Boston institutions are only 3. There is one in Nairobi, there is one in Western Province, and there's one in Mombasa. You see? Even the remand homes, for example, when a child commits an offense and the parents are not found quickly for them to stand surety for them or to raise their bond for them or to be handed over to their parents, they have to go to a remand home.
Yeah.
They are not everywhere. They are scattered all over. So you find that maybe a child is, for example, where I'm working now in Nakuru, the remand home that we have here holds children from Nyahururu, from Naivasha, from Molo, Eldama Ravine, and for Nakuru. So you can see if a child has a Narok. So if a child commits an offense in Narok and they need to be remanded in custody, they'll be remanded here, at the remand home here.
Yeah.
Because there's no remand home where?
In Narok.
In Narok. There's no remand home in Naivasha. There's no remand home in Nyahururu. There's no remand home in Eldama Ravine. So how does that translate? That translates to delays. If that child is not collected, for example, by the officers to be taken to Narok on the day of the hearing of the case, what does that mean?
That
day has passed, isn't it? So those are the things that we noticed, and we have put them in the right places so that changes can be brought in place, so that institutions can be put in place where they are near to children. Yesterday, I attended one of the celebrations, and the children were saying the problem sometimes is just delays. There was one who was speaking on NTV during one of those discussions. He said the issue is that maybe delays, and sometimes those delays are caused not because the court is not sitting, not because the officer does not want to, people don't want to testify, but because of those logistical problems. Serious logistical problem.
When you speak of the reforms that you've proposed and that have already started being worked on, are there milestones? Like, for instance, by saying that by this time, we should no longer be having police officers saying we don't have money to transport a child to an institution.
Yes, because that's a very good question. In fact, our report, the report for the task force, was very well received. And the government institutions involved, everyone has embraced what is in that because we didn't just prepare a report. It was something that was happening as we went along. Like if we went, for example, to Coast Province, and we didn't just go there to ask people questions. The task force would go there, hold a training for the court users committee, meet them and find out what are the challenges. And then, in addition to that, now do what you would call a service week. Service week would be like, by the time we went, we would have all the pending children cases, all of them fixed for hearing during that particular week. And what does that mean? You bring together the police, probation officers, children officers, lawyers, prosecutors, even volunteer counselors, everyone, the court users committee would bring together all these people so that week they would try and deal with the children cases that have been pending, because the backlog has been there. We admit there's been backlog. So we would go down to wherever we went as a task force during that time. That is what would happen. And the beauty of it is that the service week was declared, November every year was declared by the judiciary as a month for service week for dealing with any backlog that might have built up, with an encouragement that children matters be given priority. So what I'm saying is that when the task force was going around the country, those are the things that we were not just going to seek views. It was working. You go there, you have put in place all these things, because some of the infrastructure was already in place, like the CUC. So working with the CUC, go down there, meet the people, have the cases done, have a training, discuss the challenges, and now get them out practically. Because we would sit in court, we would participate in these things. We would not just go there and ask for views, but actually working with the court users, the magistrates, the prosecutors, the police, the investigators, and everybody else. So what I'm saying is that the challenges that were found, actually things are in place. We were carrying out our TORs, but at the same time, almost implementing some of the things that we found needed to be done.
Yes. Right. Does it, as we look at how things may or may not have progressed over time, and with these reminders that we are looking at now, okay, fine, we know that every June 16th will come around and there will be reminders put out. Are we going to get to a time whereby we're not going to have to be dealing with these issues, and the reason being given is that there's no money? It seems to me that there must be another reason as to why these things are not working. Like some of the things you talk about, something as basic as children not having shoes, whether they're in a remand center or not. Somebody not following this process, which has been instituted by law, because there's no money for the fuel for the vehicle. Somebody's not able to do something because there's no money to fill a particular imprest. Are we going to get away from this excuse? Because it just seems like it's one that's given all the time.
I think, this is my understanding of the situation. Having put together the recommendations we made, and having been on the ground, and having met all the people who are involved, one of the things you find actually, money may not be the big thing when it comes to the actual implementation of things on the ground. Of course, the big picture requires money. You need money to run institutions. You need money to have trained personnel. You need money, for all these things, you need money. But one thing that you will realize, and if you go to the ground, you'll find this. For as long as the court users committees sit, they are actually able to find solutions to some of those small problems. Like I said, if police don't have money to fuel the car, another department may be able to say, okay, we will do this. Or an NGO who works in the area will be able to actually offer a certain service that is not there. You see? So somehow, for children, somebody somewhere will find a solution will be found. The only thing is that hopefully that with time, a budget line that will be put in place to actually deal with issues of justice for children somewhere. For example, let me just give you a small example that training. If you ask me, training and acquiring skills and knowledge and expertise in the area of handling children is a very important thing. But all these players, maybe it's one or two of the players who get a specific training on how to handle children. You mentioned the police, for example, that they may get a session during their training on issues of children's rights. But the nitty-gritties of handling a child, how do you arrest a child, how do you all those things, maybe nobody gets that training. Do they have counselors? For example, you'd expect maybe they would have someone at the police station, someone who would be able, like say a victim of child defilement arrives at the station. Is there an officer trained specifically on how to take the report from this child, to actually speak to this child in a way that they don't feel, So people
Further
have to use
victimized.
like their what they know as human beings because that training is there. Even as a magistrate, I can tell you, when I was appointed as a children magistrate, I know the law, but it's not the same when you sit in court to hear a child giving evidence.
Right.
You get me? Yes.
So it sounds like
that training,
it's
one
an
of the
attitude problem.
things,
It's an attitude issue then, Justice. It's an attitude issue from the very beginning, from the beginning of our system. We assume that because you've dealt with children before, you're just handling children. Because you have younger siblings, you have been to school, you have dealt with children, then you should be able to handle children. And when you talk about training, then people wonder, training on dealing with children. What do you mean training? What do you need training to talk to a child?
In fact, now that you mentioned, that is one of the TORs that was put for the task force to actually make recommendations on a minimum training for persons who handle children, and it is there. The recommendation was made. But some time ago, about 10 years ago, there was a program that was a collaboration between our government and the government of Japan. Take a program on it was called the CCPO, Child Care and Protection Officers Training, where you'd put in the same classroom a magistrate, a police officer, a prison officer, a probation officer, a children officer. You can imagine that scenario, and they would sit in the same classroom and learn the same things on how to deal with children. And I can tell you, for the 4 or 5 years this program ran, the people who went through that training, if you meet them today, they are very different people. Because that person knows what to expect from the magistrate. The magistrate knows what to expect from the police officer. They know that it is a system and it needs to work in a certain way, because the only thing that brings them together is the child, and they all have an obligation to treat the child with certain standards, from the point they enter the system to the point they exit, and even when they're in the institution. So when I talk about training, it is something that we know is valuable. But when that support from JICA went, then we were not able to support the program as the government. We did it, I think, for a year or two, and
that was
died.
the end.
But right now, the task force recommended the revival of that training, because when we put, because we are all brought together by the child officers in any of these institutions dealing with children together, then you see a very big difference in the way they deal with children. The attitude goes away, and it is replaced by a professional attitude towards dealing with a child. So that is one of the gaps. That would need to be addressed. So when you talk about changes, I think for me, I see that if that is put in place, then you can start seeing a difference.
Lady Justice Theresia Matheka of the High Court, she has been telling us about issues of children accessing justice, and that's a conversation that we've been having.
Right. So I mean, as we continue with that, just looking at what the sentiment would come out of many people as we think about this, Justice Matheka, is that if there seems to be an issue with the system, if there seems to be an issue with the attitude, are we going to get to a point whereby things would at least be perceived to be flawless, and we're not going to have some of these issues that we are experiencing now?
What I know is that we cannot have a flawless system. As long as we have human beings in any place, we know that for a fact, but we can have a working system. We can have a system that is, alive and aware of its shortfalls, of aware of where the gaps are, and a system that is always trying or making the effort to deal with those gaps. I think, and that is there. That for sure, I know that time it is now, actually, because one of the things that happened is when we got our constitution, and you know that the rights of the child were elevated to that level.
Yep.
They were put in Article 53. And although the Children's Act was way ahead of our constitution, because in the Children's Act we have a Bill of Rights for children. It was there way before the constitution came. The problem was in implementation. But the time is now, as far as I am concerned, because this is the time when everyone is, becoming very conscious of the fact that our children have a problem, and that we need to start getting very consciously aware of the fact that we need to put in place systems that will take care of those problems. Not dealing with them as you were saying earlier, that they are my children, and don't tell me what is my children. No, that they belong to all of us. That children, there is no property. Children belong to all of us, and until we are aware, and that we need to remove that from us, that they belong to all of us, because without them we don't have a tomorrow. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
So a flawless system will not be there. But for as long as we have, as I said, members of that system or people in that system who are aware that the gap is here, the gap is here, the gap is here, and I have to do something to fill it, then that will be the proper system. And I know now is the time, because everybody, at least within the court users committee, as I said earlier, is very much alive to that. Not just where I am, but around the country, that we need to address those issues.
Right. If we switch things just a little bit, Justice Matheka, and now looking at issues, I mean, and we've seen a rise in this in the recent past, with all the other things that we've seen a rise in, is that now parties then going to court looking at the care of their children, and unfortunately in most cases using children as bait to then get the court to rule on their side.
Commoditization of children.
Right?
Yeah.
We've seen the rise of such cases.
That is a fact, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, how is this handled? Is there an awareness on the side of justice that this is actually happening, and that, the parents, whether they're joined legally by marriage or any other way, whether they've come together on an agreement, then using children in this manner, what's the side of the government, of the law on this?
Okay. Let me just start by saying that one of the weaknesses we have in our justice system for children is that we don't have a welfare system in place. It's a fact, we don't have.
Yeah.
For example, let's start with a child who is out in the street. If we had a proper welfare system, there would be a rescue center where, when a child has those issues, and we call them children in need of care and protection, ends up somewhere where the system will take care of them. So when two parents are having a problem, the law recognizes that those children immediately become children in need of care and protection. Immediately, it is provided for in the law. And the way it should go, let me give you now the ideal. The way the law looks at it is that the moment those parents begin fighting in court, that if we had that welfare system, now the other people would come in, say, for example, the Department of Children's Services, and start looking at the welfare of these children. What would be expected is that a file, as the parents are fighting in court, say, over divorce, whatever, a file would be opened separately for welfare, so that the court can be looking at how are these children still eating? Are they still going to school? Are they still, do they have psychological issues? That would be taken care of. Of course, there are courts where they try to do that, but like I said, the limitation is official personnel to do that. So what happens is, when these parents now begin to fight, the court is just faced with there are two adults here and there are children in this place. So how do I deal with this matter? I will ask a children officer, please go and do an assessment for me on the ground to see which of the parents or who can take care of these children. So the children officer will go and do a report and talk to neighbors or whoever, and come back and say, I think from what I've learned or what I've gathered, my assessment is the children will be better off with so and so. But the law says both parents should have access, isn't it? Because the child has a right. Remember, we are talking about the child. No, it's not the parents. It's the child. The child has a right to have access to both parents.
To both parents.
Yes.
That's very interesting, Judge, that you say
that, because that is what we forget.
Things they're a bit different than they were, if you want to say, 10 years or 15 years ago, whereby if you just look at it now, a lot of parents, or even if it's single parents, feel that so long as they're there giving the child everything that they need, then it's okay.
No,
The other parent.
that is
have no
where we
say.
lost it. That is where we lost it, because ukiangalia katiba, now let me speak in that Kiswahili that I like. Ukiangalia katiba yetu article 53, it says very clearly that regardless of whether the parents are married or not, can we start from there? Whether they are married or not, they have equal responsibility. And the child within the Children's Act has a right to access both parents. It's the right of not the right of the parent to access their child, the right of the child to access their parent. So if we start from looking at that point, we will never go wrong, because we will be saying what is in the best interest of this child. And that is what the Constitution tells us. It is not whether the parent A has the money and what, or parent B does not have anything if they are left with the child. It is what is in the best interest of this child. It is not just food. If you look at the law, it is not just food and school and having things. It is about care and protection. And care and protection may not really require money. It is the presence of parents. We know that.
True.
And the example I always give is, you have people with mental disabilities. You will meet a woman with a mental disability carrying her baby on her back. They will never harm their child. Now, you've seen. So, two people who are normal in their heads, let me use that word with a lot of salt and Royco and other things. Two people come to court, they are fighting over. First, it is their issue. They are the ones who've broken up. The child has not broken up with them. So that is where we should start. And actually the law puts, but you see, human beings, we complicate things. Somebody will run away with the children, will hide the children, will tell them your mother or your father is a witch or whatever. We've had those stories in court where somebody says, if you talk to your mother, you'll die. Or if you talk to your father, what will happen? We have those things. A child who a few months ago just knew that this is my mother and this is my father,
suddenly knows one is a monster.
A different way. Yes. So that is where we go wrong. And why are we having a challenge in the court? As I said, we have a gap. The welfare, we have a social protection department somewhere, but how does it function? Because children who are in such a situation,
what would it take to have this welfare system in place?
Can I say something? Yesterday I saw in the media that Makueni County has the first gender recovery something rescue for sex and gender-based violence victims. Did you see it? It was in the media. It was somewhere in the media. You saw it?
Yes.
For how long have we said we need shelters for women and children and even men who get beaten by other people? We've said it forever, isn't it? But it has taken one county to wake up in the morning and say, our people are getting hurt because kuna watu who have mental issues who will actually hurt you. So that person who comes crying, I'm suffering, we need to rescue them for a while as we sort out the person who is hurting them. It is the same in this country right now as we see those cases in court. Unless we wake up and say we actually need a system where we can rescue children like those from those parents for a while, as they sort out their issues, we are damaging these children.
As we conclude the conversation, Judge, let me bring us back to this issue of the commoditization and commercialization of children. We have seen this happen in very many places. People come up with children's homes. Yesterday, there was a story that came out of America of this U.S. missionary, Gregory Dow, who pleaded guilty to sexually abusing young girls at a Bomet orphanage. This matter had been tried to be addressed at various levels in Kenya. This particular orphanage, the children's officers, the police, judicial people. And then it goes to America, and this is where we start seeing wheels of justice moving. What is wrong here?
Okay, again, I will not say that something is wrong. It is something is missing. Something is missing. Why do children, first of all, end up in children's homes? Why? Why do we have in our system children homes? Because we don't have, run by individuals.
because the
Are you getting me?
The welfare thing is missing.
Doesn't exist.
Thank you very much. Because we do not have our own as a government, that system I was telling you about. If they are there rescue centers, they are very few. But the CCIs, we call them charitable children institutions, are all over the country. How are they run? It is only recently that somebody somewhere thought that they need to be trained, they need to have, and that was themselves. I remember meeting them. They formed an umbrella organization. I think it's the Association of Charitable Children Institutions in Kenya. And they formed this association because so that they can be able to train themselves, not Serikali as training them, to be able to run those homes properly. But the question I've always asked myself, why do we need CCIs? Because we have a gap. When we have orphans being thrown out of homes, when my sister dies or my brother dies and I throw her children out of the home, now, where do I expect them to go?
Yeah.
You know, and somebody decides, okay, I'll start this home, maybe in good faith, but along the way, of course, issues of money come along. You look for sponsors and things happen like that. Some homes don't even have anything. Others don't have food. They don't have, they have all. But they are doing a very good job in this country because we don't have our welfare system for children like those. I would say does not exist.
Yeah.
Because if government had its own institutions, then they would be able to have children going there. Now, regulation of these institutions, there are rules and regulations, but supervision is supposed to be done by the Department of Children's Services. Do they have enough personnel to do that? Are they able to do that? The infrastructure for supervising these homes is within, is set out in the Children's Act, but are they enabled to do it? Because they are supposed to be approved by the Department of Children's Services, inspected by the Department of Children's Services, and be able to see that these children are taken care of. As a court, I may be sitting in court somewhere in Nakuru here. The police bring me a child who was dropped at the police station last night, at the gate there last night, an infant. I don't have to take them. Either it's at the hospital, in the children's ward. How long can they keep the kid there? Then the next thing is to make an order to commit these children to a CCI.
Right.
Because they help us to give these children somewhere. So the problem is regulation, inspection, and, oversight. And remember, the government does not give them any support. They don't get any money from government. So somehow they run their own things. So bad things happen to our children because we leave them in the hands of these people and we don't have a proper system for inspection, supervision, all those things. So when it comes to investigating these cases, who are your witnesses again?
The children.
Who are the witnesses? The same victims, the children.
Yep.
Who see this person as who? As their benefactor.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the vicious cycle?
Yeah, true.
So sometimes those cases are difficult because of that. But I'm not saying I would never approve. In fact, if it was possible, they'd be closed in a day, all of them. But you can't, because where will you take those kids?
It seems
and some actually don't have somewhere
to go. It seems
and relatives will not take them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seems there's still a lot of work to be done, and as we often say in this room, the conversation then needs to continue, because
it must continue.
From then, hopefully, then some kind of action will be taken if we keep talking about it as opposed to sweeping it under the carpet.
But like we keep saying, we need to have we have a bill pending to be passed in Parliament that has reviewed the whole children's law, which has taken since 2018. It's pending there. We don't know where it is held up, but we need it to put in new, because of our constitution, the old act the current act did not have certain provisions that broaden the way we take care of our children. If this could be passed into law, I don't know where it in a kwama wapi, but if it could be passed into law, it would actually assist institutions to do more, because you need a legal framework also to push government to do certain things, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
We need that.
It's true.
But all I want to say, because maybe time is running, is that everyone, I can assure you, people who are dealing with children are trying. they're actually trying to put these things in place, because nobody will want a child to come. You know, if you sit in court or you see the police officers who also handle these things, if you're not trained, you'll deal with them the way you know, isn't it? So they try. Everyone is trying, but if
still need a boost.
If they implement also the recommendations we put in the task force report that was presented last year, I can assure you, even at the policy level, just policy level before we get the law, then you'll start seeing things moving. But like I told you, people are already doing things because you will never let a child, if you are a human being,
you'll never let a child
suffer when you can do something about it.
Justice, Lady Justice Theresia Matheka, thank you so much for joining us in the room this morning and giving us some of these insights. It's unfortunate we have to say bye so early because the conversation absolutely does need to continue.
All right.
But thank you so much for giving us the insights that you have today. Asante sana, and as you continue work in Nakuru and around the country, it's only our hope that it does get better.
And for me, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that you, as Spice FM and whoever, you can continue the conversation and continue challenging us, because you can be the voice of the child. Because children can't speak for themselves. They need you and me to speak for them and to say that this is missing and it needs to be done. And
challenge
finally,
accepted.
Yes, and finally, that you need to tell people that the achieving this child-friendly justice system is the responsibility of each one of us.
Yeah.
Each one of us, all of us together.
Asante sana.
Thank you so much.
Asante sana, and have a good day.
Fantastic.
You too.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
It's good to speak to an officer of the law who is so passionate about such matters, because we're talking about children now.
But she's handicapped.
True.
And
she can only go so far.
She's really, really handicapped.
this is the much
very little wiggle room does she have.
Very, very little. Very, very, very little. Because there's an entire ministry that is charged with ensuring that these things function. And when you hear that money hasn't reached some of these institutions, not at for a month.
Yes.
Budget has not been requested for, money therefore was not appropriated, so money will never.
So you pause and you wonder, hey,
how?
Very interesting conversation. We'll continue this conversation some other time.